back to talknorth.com. Thank you for listening. If you can, please download before you listen. It helps our business. I'd also like to thank our producer, Brandon Morton, and let you know if you'd like to sponsor this program or any of the programs on the network, you can reach me at jsouhan47@gmail.com. On Jeff Diamond's show, we talked about what it's like for an executive at the Combine, what it's like behind the scenes. Now we're going to tell you what it was like, Tim Yoder, to cover the Combine and cover the Vikings at the Combine and what actually went down that is of interest to Viking fans. This is the Viking Update Show, part of the TalkNorth.com podcast network. Again, we have two football shows that are excellent. This show covering the Vikings in depth, and Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider, which takes the executive view from an agent's perspective, a GM's perspective, a president's perspective. You get everything you need out of this network from those two shows. I think we're going to start off talking about Anthony Barr and where he might end up going. Do want to thank our producer, Brandon Morton. Please download before you listen. You can follow us at Talk North Pod on Twitter. And if you'd like to advertise with us, you can reach us at talknorthpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks to Twill and the Edina Galleria, Tony Hoagland, your State Farm agent Champlain, and also Bite Squad. Bite Squad has a special promo this week for the prep hockey tournament. The state of hockey does stop at its tracks the first week of March each year to watch an event that is simply called the Tourney. If you're going to be watching the games from home, we want you to know that we're teaming up with the folks from Bite Squad to bring you your favorite foods from hundreds of Twin Cities restaurants. If you enter the code HOCKEY when you order, you'll get 10% off your entire order. Code HOCKEY to get 10% off your entire order. That is Wednesday through Sunday this week, the first week in March. We'll tell you more about that deal as we get going forward. Tell me about Anthony Barr, Tim.
Yeah, well, I mean, just in talking to Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman at the Combine, it seems to me that, especially with Barr, it's going to come down to money. Just with where the Vikings are with their salary cap, they've got about $7 million under the cap right now. Some other moves, small moves like maybe not picking up the option officially for Andrew Sendejo could create some space, or some larger moves like perhaps looking to trade or release guys like Everson Griffin. Trey Waynes was a big rumor at the Combine. And perhaps restructuring or releasing or trying to trade Kyle Rudolph. So there are a lot of rumors that come out at this time of year. Which ones to believe and which ones not to believe are pretty difficult, because it kind of depends on where the rumor is coming from and if it actually makes sense or not. But they are going to have to do something with the salary cap if they stand any chance of re-signing Anthony Barr, or for that matter, Sheldon Richardson. The telling quote from Zimmer during the Combine was when he was talking about Barr specifically. He said, so if it goes to, if Barr gets paid $18 million, it probably ain't going to happen, which, you know what? He's absolutely right. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't think Barr is going to see that kind of money, but I could see something in the $12 to $13 million per year range for him. And I just don't think it necessarily makes sense for the Vikings to do that, given how they use Barr. And I still believe that with the lack of pass rushing snaps that he had with the Vikings last year, that his best defense is probably as a 3-4 outside linebacker, where he is primarily used as a pass rusher. So I think he's going to end up getting into free agency, or at least the negotiating window that opens up on March 10th, and then take it from there and see where things fall with, what he thinks his market value is. He can kind of flesh that out a little bit, and where the Vikings think they want to be able to, or how much money they think they can afford to pay him.
It was also interesting to hear Zimmer talking in terms of, his personal attachment to Barr. The fact that he was his first number one pick, the fact that he's kind of the perfect Zimmer player and that he can rush the passer, he can stop the run, he can cover sideline on sideline, he can run downfield. When he plays well, he's an ideal chess piece. So if you want to get down to what Zimmer would do if he was the general manager, do you think it would be anything different than what Spielman is going to do as general manager?
Well, I mean, if they had the money, Zimmer would sign him, I think, right away. But, I think Spielman has to look out for the franchise long term. And there's always that kind of give and take between a general manager and a head coach where, a head coach is always saying, I want to win now. And, a general manager kind of has to take the broader view of the franchise. And to me, the broader view means you have to pay attention to every position and both sides of the ball as well as special teams, not just defense. And so, if I'm Spielman, I'm saying we're going to have to let Barr walk. He wants too much money. And I think that I really think that they got that sense last spring already when, Barr did not show up right away to OTAs because he was, I think he finally realized at that point that the Vikings were far down the road on a Diggs contract, on a Kendricks contract, and that his contract was not going to be what he maybe thought he was worth, and therefore he wanted to get some medical insurance policy that basically protected his value if he were to get hurt in off-season workouts. So I think there is a little bit of a different view that the general manager and the head coach have to take at this time. And, if I'm Spielman, I'm trying to address things on offense more than I am on defense.
So Adam Schefter reported the Vikings were trying to trade Barr last summer. That makes a lot of sense to me. How about you?
Well, yeah, Schefter is almost always right on the money with reports. He's got very good sources around the league. And I think it makes sense that, first of all, Barr doesn't show up for a couple of OTAs while he's trying to get that insurance policy. And then, they know where their cap is. They're planning 2-3 years down the road. And they probably figured, okay, if we are going to sign Diggs and Kendricks and Danielle Hunter, you can't have them all is basically the way it goes. And so I think it made a lot of sense for them to try to quietly shop Anthony Barr last year. And, I think it makes sense for them to gauge the market on some other players right now, like an Everson Griffin or a Kyle Rudolph or a Trey Waynes even. So, I don't think that means that the Vikings are down on any of those players. They just know that they're tied up against the cap and they have to do something about it in order to, not only sign a few players on offense, but to be able to afford to pay their draft picks.
What's up, Sheldon Richardson?
Yeah, his agent did meet with the Vikings. I think it was Friday night. I've just gotten the sense that there's nothing that's imminent there either. I've talked to a few representatives for smaller agents as well, or, not as expensive free agents that the Vikings have coming up as well. And the message that keeps coming back is, yes, we've talked, in most cases, I think a lot of the players would like to come back. The Vikings would like to have them back, but it just comes down to money, and the Vikings just don't have a lot of salary cap space to maneuver with at this point.
Right. Hey, we want to thank Twill, twillmn.com, Twill, Twill on Instagram. I buy my clothes there. If they can make me look good, they can make anybody look good.
Jim usually doesn't like to shop for clothes. I don't like it when he shops for clothes either, because he used to buy stuff I'd want to throw out. That's why I'm so glad he's found Twill in the Edina Galleria. He likes shopping there because of the comfortable environment and the friendly staff. He finds clothes that actually fit him properly and are high-quality brands that will look great for years, whether he's golfing or working. Our favorites so far are Peter Millar, Johnny O, and Barber. We spend our money at Twill because we love the clothes and we love the no-pressure shopping. Drop by Twill in the Edina Galleria for the best shopping experience and best clothes you'll find in the Twin Cities.
What's up with Tom Johnson? I've always really liked him as a guy and a player, and it was very interesting that he ended up coming back to the Vikings last year.
Yeah, well, one thing I found out over the combine is that I reached out to his agent to see what was going on, and he actually switched agents. So I found that to be kind of a curious move because if you remember, last year he ended up signing with Seattle in free agency, and I'm sure he wasn't thrilled about that, and that the Vikings had signed Sheldon Richardson, but Seattle was trying to make some cute little roster moves and thought that they could release Tom Johnson, promote another guy to a different position for a week, and then re-sign Tom Johnson back to their squad. Well, the Vikings saw him on waivers, and they were like, yeah, we want him back. And so, Tom actually was getting 2 paychecks. His salary for that opening game, your base salary is guaranteed for the rest of the year. So he kind of got a nice double dip. And so I found it curious that he fired his agent and went with a new one this year. So, if Sheldon Richardson isn't back, I think he makes a ton of sense for the Vikings to re-sign him and then draft another defensive tackle, in the first couple of rounds. And this really is, by all accounts, a spectacular draft on the defensive line.
Yeah, that's what we keep hearing, and the Vikings are loaded there. But maybe it's not. You said maybe the Vikings don't say, okay, we don't need a defensive lineman. Maybe they use the draft to say maybe we can have a cheaper defensive line.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've already got Danielle Hunter there, so that's gonna and Linval Joseph pulling down a huge paycheck as well, and if Everson Griffin's still there, that counts as well. So yeah, they've got a lot of highly paid guys, but they do need to start to infuse some youth in there. They've got Jaleel Johnson, they've got Jalen Holmes, but neither of those guys have necessarily proven themselves. And the thing that I kept hearing at the combine is, man, some of these defensive ends and defensive tackles that might go in the second round really could have been a top 10 overall pick in previous years. It's just that for whatever reason, this is a historically good defensive line draft class.
They're not going. The Vikings aren't going to take 2 defensive linemen in the first 2 rounds, are they? They're not going to do that. Even if Zimmer wants them to, they're not going to do that, right?
No, I think they are well aware of the perception and what they need to do. Now, the one advantage that they have, though, is that free agency is a month before, actually like 6 weeks before the draft. And so, they can see if they can kind of address some of their offensive line issues in free agency. I don't think they're going to go out and be able to afford like a Roger Saffold or anything like that. But, if they get a quality starter or 2 on the interior of that line, then they don't necessarily have to go offensive line in the first round. But I am not going to be surprised at all if they pick an offensive lineman at number 18, if, in the second or third round, they're trying to tap into the talent on the defensive line at some position, probably the 3 technique, if I had to guess.
Another trade possibility would be Trey Waynes.
Yeah, that one I think is going to be a tougher one for the Vikings because, he is under his 5th-year option. And so if there is a team that's interested in trading for him, they're going to have some assurances that a longer-term contract is going to be on the table. And I don't think this is as good of a cornerback draft as we've seen in the past. And so, maybe there is interest from a team that's willing to give up, I don't know. I'm not necessarily sure that the Vikings would get a first round pick for Trey Waynes. And if they did, it would certainly be low first round. But, instead of paying the roughly $9 million it's going to cost on this 5th-year option, if they were able to trade that away, okay, that clears up cap space for you. And you should get, low first round or somewhere in the second round type pick for him. Just I think given the way that Holton Hill played last year, that it should give them a little bit of comfort that they have depth at the position and can make some moves there without being hurt too badly. But of course, we know how much that Mike Zimmer loves his cornerback.